Alright, welcome to episode 2, Dirt Bike Dad's Garage. Today, we're going to go over cleaning of the carburetor. It's pretty in-depth, but pretty easy. It's typically made for the guy who isn't that familiar, like myself, and you just want to learn, and you want to know what you're doing, and you might not want to spend the money to buy a new one. Let's get started. Let's just run over a quick basic. Here you got a choke lever, fuel input side right here. Top is where your throttle slide comes down through. Here's your air inlet, and on this side is the output side that goes into the engine. So first thing I like to usually do with these is go ahead and get this bowl off and see what we got inside. So first thing, take the Phillip bowl off. There's 2 Phillips head screws down here. One thing you need to be careful about is stripping these out. I like to see first alright, now we got the carburetor out. We're going to go ahead and take it apart, see what we're working with here. One thing you need to be careful of is to not strip the screws. So if you start unscrewing something and it feels a little slippy, go ahead and grab a small impact, and we'll only use it to remove the screws. Don't use it to put the screws back in. So this one's a little tight, so we'll grab the impact. And it'll bust it free. A little bit of fuel flop out. We'll go ahead and set that to the side. The other side. Crack it free, and we'll take that one off. And we'll go ahead and open that up, and we'll check out in the bowl. This one's actually extremely clean. A little bit of fuel in there, but no debris, no dirt, no nothing. It's actually a big surprise. So we'll dump fuel there in our bucket, and we'll go ahead and check out the rest of it. Now we'll go ahead and check out the float. Make sure it has good spring, not too low, also not too high. The float controls this little needle valve inside of here, letting fuel into the carburetor. So we'll go ahead and take that out and check it out as well. This one you use a small punch or a kind of pick. We'll go ahead and slide this little peg out, holding the float in. Pop that out. And we'll go ahead and pull that right out. Once you get that out, your float should come out, and either your needle will stick to it or it'll fall into the bowl. Here's ours. Also in pretty good shape. I'd say this was a replacement carburetor at some point. A lot of times you'll find them with some kind of deformity on the cone side. This one seems pretty smooth. So we'll set that aside. And we want to check our flow, make sure there's no holes. This looks pretty good too. Like I said, this is probably a replacement. So, next thing, we're going to want to look at our jets. First one you got in the middle here, this is called your main jet. And this one here to the side is called your pilot jet. Nice flathead screw, get those, screwdriver, get those right out. So, first we got our main jet out, set that off to the side, then we'll get our pilot jet. And we go ahead and pull that out. Now you can also pull this out here. This is called your emulsion tube. This is where your pilot jet sits in, and it's the little brass tube about halfway back that sticks up where the fuel comes into the carburetor. If you can look down in the end of that and see light, you're usually in pretty good shape, and you can go ahead and leave it in. So we'll take a good look down this one. Looks pretty good. One good way is hold it towards the light and put your finger in it. If the light disappears, you're good. And we got a good solid clean hole through there. If not, go ahead and grab a wrench, undo this, take it out, we'll clean that as well. Alright, we'll move over to this side. Now we're looking at our set screws. This one here, closer to the engine side, or exit side, is called your idle screw. This one helps you set your idle. This one down here, closest to your input side, or your air inlet side, is called your mixture screw. When you screw this in or out, it allows more fuel or less fuel into the mixture, making you run leaner or more rich. So we'll go ahead and pull those out as well. Be careful when pulling these out, as there's usually a spring right behind it. We don't want to lose that. Just like that. We'll go ahead and we'll check that out. Like I said, this one looks to be a replacement, so this is in really good shape. Sometimes, same as the last, you'll see some deformities. Another thing you can run into is the end is smushed because someone tried to over tighten it into its seat. So be careful when we put it back on not to do the same thing. And then we'll pull out our idle. Same thing, this one has a screw attached to it. Once we get it, pull that out, check that one out as well. This should be more of a rounder tip, as you see there. And same thing, pretty good shape. Alright, once you got it completely pulled out, we're going to go ahead and want to clean it. Since this one seems to be in pretty good shape and probably doesn't need a cleaning, we'll go ahead and get a dummy. I got one right here. Alright, once you get your carburetor completely disassembled, we'll go ahead and start cleaning. There's a few main components on the carb body that we want to get cleaned. First one, through that emulsion tube. Then we're going to want to go ahead and get through our pilot jet hole. Then we're going to kind of turn it around, and we want to get that spray nozzle right there facing towards us. That's the one that always lets fuel in whether you're giving it throttle or not. And when you give it throttle, the needle comes up and more fuel will flow through that emulsion tube, giving you more power. And we'll also come in through this air mixture hole. This is a hole that's connected to your air mixture screw, allowing a little bit more fuel or a little less fuel depending on how you have it set. So we'll go ahead and take some carb spray and we'll shoot it down each one of those, get those cleaned out. Shouldn't take much. Next thing we're going to do, we're going to either grab a bread tie, which I have a few here. If you don't have anything like that, you can maybe use some small wire. Other tools I've seen people use are welding tip cleaners, anything that you can get down through those small holes. So first we're going to come in, we're going to try, poke through these, make sure that all the gunk's out. And on this one here, when you poke through, you can actually see. Let me see if we can get the light just right. You may not be able to see that, but you're able to see your wire come through. I'm not sure if I'm able to pick that up. Oh, there it is. So that one's pretty clean. Next one we're going to come after is our spray nozzle. It's pointing right at us. That one's pretty easy. You can't really see that one, but we'll clean it from the top, and we'll come down from the pilot jet side and clean that one from the bottom. Once you get that filled up through, then we'll go ahead and take that same wire and we'll come up through the emulsion tube, and you should be able to see that one come through. There it is right there. So we'll get that through. We want to make sure that those three are pretty well cleaned. Last one we want to attack on the actual carb body is the fuel inlet. So we'll go ahead, we'll shove the poker down there. Make sure that's nice and clean. Now that's the inlet, that's where the fuel comes in, and it'll come in through the needle valve seat right down below. So we'll go ahead and get that side pretty well, and we'll come back to the other side and get it inside the needle valve seat hole. That's pretty much for the carb body. This one's a little dirty on the outside, but the outside isn't going to affect it. But some people like it to look clean, so they'll get it all washed up. Next we'll move on to the parts. This is where the bread tie comes in handy, or some of those welder tips. First one we're going to do is the pilot jet. This is the one with the smaller holes, which is why the bread tie works good here. So if you look at this, you'll notice a few holes on the side. There's two there, one there. Those go straight through. So we'll go ahead and stick our bread tie through, and we'll feed it straight through. Same thing on the other two. Now, the reason for the bread tie is the pilot screw's a lot smaller hole than the main jet. I'm not sure if you can see through there. Oh, you can. There it is, right there. It's a real tiny hole. Sometimes you can't see through and it looks like that. So you go ahead and take your bread tie, and we'll get it straight through. And a bread tie fits through most pilot jets, so we should be able to get this bad boy all the way through. It's a lot easier when your bread tie's not all crinked up, but we'll try for both ends. And we'll keep trying. If it's real mucked up, you can go ahead and take a carb spray, give it a little shot down in it, loosen it up. You can shoot it with some compressed air, but this bread tie here, or tip, whatever you're using, works the best. When you're done, you should be able to see through that, a tiny little hole just like that. I didn't think we'd be able to catch that on camera. So once you got that, we'll set that aside, and we'll go ahead and move on to the main jet. Same idea. We're going to want to clean out the jet hole. This one's a lot bigger than your pilot jet, and you can tell real quickly if this one's clogged or not. This one you don't need as small of a bread tie, but the bread tie helps let you get every little part. So we'll go ahead and get it in there. Same thing, you can shoot some carb spray through it, give it some compressed air. This one's good to go. Last couple things we're going to check on. Again, we want to double check our idle set screw. We want to make sure it's rounded still. Good spring. This one looks good. We want to check on our mixture screw. We want to make sure it's a nice cone shape. And I don't know if you can tell from that picture, but you want it to be a machined flat edge. One thing you can tell is these get smushed out when people try to screw them in too tight. So when we put this back in, we'll make sure we put it in just nice and snug. And the last couple things to look at, of course, is your float. You want to make sure there's no holes in it. Looks pretty good. And we want to check our needle valve. This one is a little different than the first one I showed you. It has a little bit of a discoloration between the top here and the bottom. That's where the wear usually starts to happen. Where you see that discoloration stop, that's where it seats into the needle valve seat. And we'll compare it to the one that looks virtually brand new. And you'll see no difference on the head. And we'll get it to focus there. And that's pretty small. I'm not going to focus. You get the idea. It'll be smooth, no discoloration, all the same color. So, once we get that, last thing we want to check is the gasket on the bowl. So, we'll come here, we'll make sure it's all intact. We want it all to be one continuous piece. And we want to make sure that the gasket sticks up just a little bit from the carb body. You can barely tell. But when those gaskets get flat and you can't tell the difference between the carb body and the gasket, that's when it's time to replace, because that's when it'll start leaking through. So once we get all that checked, we'll go ahead and put it back together. So we'll get our carb. We'll go ahead and we'll grab our inlet, or our idle screw. Get that one pressed down in. Now this one we can set now, or we can seat it now. I like to set it, so we'll show you that. And it really depends on your machine. There's a million different ways and a million different opinions on this, on how these should be set. But I'll show you how I do it. We get it seated, which is just nice and snug on the edge. Let's get a smaller flathead here. So we'll seat that. There we go, we're still going. And you'll just feel it stop. Just mild pressure. Then we're going to count backwards half a turn. So here we are. And we'll go back half a turn. Next, we'll go ahead and we'll throw our mixture screw in. And we'll get that screwed in. Same idea with this one. A little bit of pressure to get it started. And we'll screw it in until we feel light pressure. That means it's seated all the way. And there we are. Now this one is where the great debate is. People go for 2 turns, 2.5 turns, 2 3/4 turns, 3 turns. I just put it 2.5. Then we'll adjust it once we get it on the machine. So go 2.5 turns back. 1, 2. I'm just kidding. Those are half turns. Half, 1, 1.5, and 2. There we go. Alright, once we got those set, we'll get our jets back in. Order doesn't matter here. We'll get them in, and we want these snug down. Be sure not to over tighten anything on this carburetor, as we don't want to strip it. We also want to grab the right parts. That's better. And we'll get our main jet. And we'll get those tightened down. Same thing, get a nice snug. And not over tighten it. Good. Now we'll go ahead, throw a needle valve back in, hook it up to our float. Your float has a little lip here, and your needle valve should have a little holder here attached around the head. So we'll go ahead, throw that on there just like that. It doesn't matter which way this goes, with these pointing to the front, to the back, to the rear, to the side. People say it should be one way, it should be the other, but if you look, the way it's mounted, the hanger is directly in the center. So, for me, I like to take those 2 angle sides and place them towards the hinge. Once we get that set, take our carburetor, then we'll just drop our needle valve right in the hole. And make sure you don't do what I just did. Put that in upside down. This little flap here needs to be facing up. So, take that off, spin it over, and put it back in. Just like that. Now we got it. Big side down, small side up. Like an iceberg. So, we'll go ahead, get the valve into the seat there, and we'll grab our little pin, slide it through the side. Make sure when you slide it in, it's flush on both sides. Smooth there, smooth there. Now you got everything back together, and we're all set. Before we get that back on, if you really want to double check that you have a nice clean needle valve seat and needle valve area, you can go ahead and try and blow through the fuel inlet port while holding the float in the closed position. You shouldn't hear any air come through. Let's see if we can pick it up. And when you let go of the float, you should be able to hear the air come through. That means it's working properly. Let's try it again. Sounds good to me. Let's go ahead and put the float bowl back on. And again, don't turn it down too much. But once you finish there, got a nice clean carburetor. We can go ahead and throw it back in. Alright, thanks for tuning in to episode 2 of Dirt Bike Dad Garage. Today we did the carb clean, a little quick carb walkthrough. Tune in next time as we'll do a top speed run on the 50cc and a couple of upgrades to maybe boost the MPHs on this bad boy. See what we can get her up to. See you next time.